Thank you all for joining us today. I know that, like I said, you all are really excited to hear from Will, as I am. Before we get started, I have just a couple of announcements. As you all know, or you may not know, our memberships are open for 2020-21. So those are available now. So thank you to those of you who have already renewed your memberships for this year. I think a great thing to note is that because we are virtual, we've actually added a virtual membership option to our list this year. So you are able to keep maybe say you're a leading level member, you can go premium, which will offer you seats at the in-person meetings when we return, or you can go virtual and just opt to have a certain number of screens for all of your guests to enjoy. So please note that those are available. We also have started a new LinkedIn group because I know that we are all missing that connection in person and being able to see each other face to face. So we'll post a couple of discussion points in that LinkedIn group. So along with your membership, you will also receive access to that. To find the LinkedIn group, you can just search Oklahoma Business Ethics Consortium and find us and request to join. We'll also be reaching out to your key contact to make sure that we get everyone registered there. So we will be posting discussion opportunities following our program each month, starting now. So thank you to those of you who have already renewed, and especially to our Pinnacle members who have renewed, Kim Ray and Williams Companies, and our Navigator and Star members, Devon Energy, Loves, Travel Stops and Country Stores, and McAfee and Taft. So this was as of Friday, end of business. So I know that several of you have renewed even this morning. So we appreciate you all for doing that. I also just wanted to note that if you're ready to renew, you can do that at okethics.org or email us at director@okethics.com, and we will get you all taken care of. So again, thanks so much, and I hope to see you all back joining us for another great year. So as I mentioned earlier, and so many of you are doing this already, you can fill out, I put the link to our CPE form in request form in the chat, or you can also just write your name and CPE in the chat as we move forward. So thanks again. I know that I think we are ready. So also please put any questions in the chat or direct them toward me, and we'll get you all taken care of. So I want to go ahead and get started with today's guiding principle. I know we've got lots of good things to get to. So today's guiding principle is going to be presented by Joshua Tanasupatra. Oh, I think I messed that one up.
No worries,
I practiced it like 4 times.
You're fine.
Joshua is the COO at Career Development Partners. He has a master's in clinical mental health. He's passionate in helping organizations become more effective in their change management and culture. His areas of expertise includes talent acquisition and development, one-on-one coaching, assessment strategy, and job analysis. His goal is to enable and empower organizations to attract, retain, and develop their employees effectively. So Joshua, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bailey. I appreciate the introduction. As Bailey mentioned, I'm Joshua Tanasupatra. I'm the COO of Career Development Partners. We are a talent management firm. We help companies recruit, retain, develop, and transition employees. But when I was asked to share a guiding principle for today's program, I couldn't help but reflect on the year 2020 and what a year it has been. And I thought about what the word of the year is going to be. And I know Merriam-Webster always picks a word of the year. And I know there's several of them that are probably in the running, including social distancing, COVID, WFH, unprecedented, pivot, and the new normal. And I thought about this word, the new normal, and I'm sure a lot of us are sick of hearing it, or even probably wanting to adapt that word. But it reminded me of a story back to when I was in college several years ago. It was about this time, around Thanksgiving. My friends and I were ready to go back home to Colorado. So we packed ourselves into this small Toyota Corolla, and we headed off to Colorado. Before we left, we had to fuel up, so we pulled up into a small gas station on a foggy Arkansas morning. My friends got out and they went in and probably bought enough junk food and beef jerky to seemingly last us a lifetime. A truck pulled up next to us and a man got out. I briefly made eye contact with him, still in a stupor as any college kid at 6 o'clock in the morning has. He walked out before my friends did, and he had some snacks and a cup of a drink in his hand. He looked at me, and before he got into his truck, he began to share several racial slurs with me. And he ended and closed by saying, "Yao Ming, why don't you go back to your country?" And slammed his truck door shut. He pulled around his truck and threw his cup out before he peeled off. As I sat there, I was overcome by a surge of emotions of fear, of shame, of anger, and confusion. And I thought about all the things I wanted to say to him, but I did not get the chance to. And I asked myself, is this normal? At the time, I was studying psychology, and I further pursued my degree in clinical mental health. And while it is a degree in treating a variety of disorders with different therapeutic modalities, it is also a degree in listening. It's a degree in asking questions. About 40% of our questions are actually statements in disguise. Another 40% of our questions are judgments. And about 20% of our questions are true questions of interest, of curiosity, of a desire to learn. And at that moment in that car, I was not in a position to listen or to ask questions. But yet I asked myself, what is my ethical responsibility to shape our new normal? Now, as we move into this fourth quarter in this period of election, I urge you as fellow Americans, as citizens, as human beings, as people, to think about the guiding principles of our organization, of ourselves. I urge you to listen before being listened to seek to understand before being understood, and to show respect, even though respect might not be reciprocated. I ask you to think about the guiding principles of our country, not only of prosperity and wealth, but of unity. So I ask you today, and I urge you today, how will you shape the new normal, not only for yourself, not only for your children, but for future generations to come? So thank you for allowing me to share this morning and to share the guiding principle of respect. Bailey, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Joshua, and for that wonderful reminder, and also just for sharing your own personal experience with us. So I think that sharing our experiences definitely makes us all a lot more understanding and empathetic with one another, and just like you said, have a lot more respect. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you.
All right, I will go ahead and take the opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker for today, Will Syring. He is the Vice President of Corporate Partnerships for the Oklahoma City Thunder, so that certainly gives him a very unique job and a unique perspective on what this COVID-19 crisis brought on that night in March. So we're excited to hear from him. Will Syring joined the Thunder in 2018 and leads the organization's business strategy to optimize sponsorship sales and brand activation. He and the Thunder's corporate partnerships team leveraged the Thunder and NBA's global platform to elevate and optimize brand awareness for new and existing corporate partners. He also guides efforts to establish unique marketing and business opportunities for the Thunder, the Oklahoma City Blue, and the Thunder Launchpad. The Thunder's diverse portfolio of corporate partners includes nearly 100 unique brands. Will joined the Thunder after 5 seasons with the Chicago Bulls, where he served in various corporate partnership roles, most recently as head of global sales. In Chicago, Syring guided a sales strategy in key markets to develop and secure innovative global partnerships in China, Poland, Germany, Mexico, Finland, and the Philippines. Utilizing a collaborative approach to partnership activation and sales, Will and his team were consistently recognized by the NBA for account development, retention, and new growth. So prior to joining the Bulls, Will represented Learfield Sports at the University of Tulsa, the Golden Hurricane, and Oregon State University. I know we have probably some University of Tulsa people with us today. There you go. He was recognized for new business and existing account growth each year at the respective Learfield properties. He started his career in Melbourne, Australia, working for the Cobras basketball team as an assistant business development manager in the team's front office. So Will's a graduate of the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, where he earned a bachelor's degree in business and administration. He lives here in Oklahoma City with his wife, Leslie, a native of Owasso, and their son, Wilder. So, Will, I'm going to let you take it away.
Well, Bailey, thank you. And Josh, appreciate your words as well. Pretty moving story, and appreciate your vulnerability there and highlighting respect. I'm actually going to talk a lot about respect and what that means to our organization as well. So thank you both. And Bailey, I appreciate you reaching out and starting this conversation months ago. I'm absolutely thrilled that this worked out, and truly honored to connect with each and every one of you today. And I wish we could be in person and give a high five and a thunder up, but it's good to see some common names that I know here on the side of this call here. And I see a lot of some familiar names as well, and several season ticket holders and current corporate partners are on this call, and several folks from Tulsa too, which is such an important market for us beyond Oklahoma City. We spent a lot of time there as a brand and as a team. But to every Thunder fan on here, I wouldn't be here without your continued support of our team. And on behalf of the entire organization, we're so thankful and grateful for your support. Thunder up. I've been so impressed as I was doing some research for this conversation by the Oklahoma Business Ethics Consortium and its mission. It's amazing what seemed to have been just a small group of leaders in 2003 has now blossomed into hundreds of leaders around the city, focusing on leading with integrity and ultimately doing what's right. It really is awesome to see this sort of leadership in our city, and it's something I candidly haven't experienced in any other market. All of you on this call have focused on leading with empathy, integrity, and sound ethical business decision-making, which has helped to elevate the profile of Oklahoma City and Oklahoma as a state. Now, before I jump into what I know you all want to talk about, which is who our next coach is going to be, or are we making any trades this offseason? Trust me, I know nothing about those two items. I do want to focus on the events of March 11th, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A after some brief comments that I'll share today. But I do want to provide some background on my career, and I appreciate, Bailey, that you highlighted that early as well, as I do feel like it's relevant to understanding how I've had the incredibly fortunate opportunity to learn from great leaders, ethical leaders in the sports business and in life that have ultimately put me in position to succeed and lead others with integrity. I don't think I knew it, but my career in sports, which clearly wasn't going to be as a professional athlete, likely started when I was a freshman in high school on the football team, and we didn't win a game with me at running back. I think I had more fumbles than total yards. I also tore my ACL twice in college, once playing intramural softball and once tailgating, which is another story for another day. But I've always had a passion for sports. And I quickly realized, as they say on the NCAA commercials, you're going to need to go pro in something else. My first job, as Bailey mentioned, was in Melbourne, Australia, with the Business Development League basketball team, the Kilsyth Cobras. I was actually a game announcer, was my first role there. For $50 a game, I would call a game and play hype music. I had studied abroad in the country and stayed connected to friends and a family and networked there after college. And Rod Pop was the one who had hired me as their director of basketball ops. Ben Turner was the representative that I ultimately got to know best for Kilsyth, and he was the head of sales and marketing and really taught me what a sports sponsorship was. I'd go in on the weekends, call the games, and during the week, I'd ask questions of Ben and say, well, what's a sports sponsorship? How does this business work? He taught me the ins and outs in the early stage of this business as I was learning as an eager just recent college graduate. He said, just hit the phones, start trying to sell something. So I hit the phones and I tried to sell signage in an arena that held less than 2,000 people. My first client was Michelle's Sewing Basket. It was for $1,800. We gave away a free sewing machine during a half-court shot promotion. Not much dissimilar from our current mid-first half-court shot promotion that some of you may know. Ben taught me a lot. He also said, if you want to work in sports, make a difference in your community, make a little bit of money, sports sponsorship is a world for you. So I was intrigued at a young age. What I learned most about Ben, though, is that attention to detail matters. My first sponsorship proposal was for a company called Phoenix Fitness, and I accidentally stretched out the logo so the graphic would fit the proposal slide. I was sternly reminded never to adjust the company's logo. Can you imagine if we would have just adjusted MidFirst Bank's logo on our LED just to fit the signage specs? That wouldn't fly. So don't mess with the company's logo, and some of you on this call can certainly relate to that. Unless you want to put a logo on the jersey patch. Shout out to Loves for putting their logo customly on our jersey right there over our left chest of our players. I came back to the US after that experience, and I worked for a man named Chris Murray with Imani Sports in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He taught me the sports agency side of this business. Yes, the Jerry Maguire show me the money version of this business, and how it's really nothing like that, especially when you're in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's really a thankless grind that takes dedication, hard work, and a ton of luck through careful relationship management. He taught me to stay true to who you are, no matter what, and understand people at their core, who they really are. I'll never forget that when he was looking to sign a player and represent them as an agent or talking to their family, he would always ask their friends, their coworkers, their relatives, their scouts. He would say, what's this player like as a person? Is he a good person? Does he do what's right? Is he involved in his community? Questions that I hadn't heard anybody in that particular role ask before. Usually they're asking, how's his 40 time? How many bench presses can he do? Can he score touchdowns? Chris could have easily taken any client, and he probably should have when he was running a small shop, but he didn't. And I learned a lot from him in that experience. My next role was finally a full-time paid salary job in a place many of you know, Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was with TU Athletics selling sponsorships for the Golden Hurricane and Learfield Sports. I worked for a man that many of you know as well, Brian McKinnell. He's the associate GM for the Sooners now. And Brian's great. I learned a lot from Brian. He actually stood up at my wedding and remained close to this day. He taught me to make meaningful, deep relationships with all stakeholders. He would always say, ask yourself every time you're connecting with somebody, what am I giving? Is it a thought, a gift? Is it a hug, an idea? But always be giving. After 2 years with Brian at TU Athletics, I was promoted to Oregon State and still within the Learfield Sports Network in Portland, Oregon. I worked for two people, Steve Sullivan and Barry Spiegelberg, two of my closest friends to date. From both, I learned how to navigate and balance the interests of others and to sell with integrity, to always do the right thing, even if it cost you some short-term revenue. Some of you know that college sports is quite a tough business. It's essentially where bureaucracy seems to meet traditional business principles in a lot of cases. So you have to be sensitive of all the influences in a room and make the right decision. After a few years with Oregon State, I was recruited by the Chicago Bulls and a man named Scott Sonnenberg. Scott was the vice president of corporate partnerships and had been with the team for nearly 10 years. He was looking for someone to lead their global sales team and elevate internal processes. Scott was a man of great integrity and ethical leadership. He had 4 children, he's got 6 now, and I've always been amazed by his ability to juggle so much and stay true to both his family and a demanding job. This is where I truly learned how to lead. He taught me to empower others, to lead with empathy. He taught me how to motivate staff, how to encourage others to dig deep and to find the best in themselves. As the head of global sales, I was lucky enough to travel the world, working with other sales reps around the world. And I learned how to adapt to cultures and ideologies that maybe didn't align with the way we thought. Brokering relationships with companies from the Philippines to China, the UK, and Poland. We approached each situation with the best intentions and delicately balanced any cultural differences. All of these experiences ultimately led me here. After 5 years in Chicago in old Learfield sports contact, some of you may know him as well, Mr. Sean Boyd, who is now with the Chickasaw Nation, reached out about an opportunity with the Thunder. And at the time, candidly, I was quite happy. I just had a baby boy. He was 3 months old at the time. I just bought a house, was living 8 minutes northeast of Wrigley Field. But I was happy to go through the process, as I had always been impressed by the Thunder. And I knew them by reputation during my time in Oklahoma 9 years prior. My first contact, and ultimately the person that became my boss and a true mentor, is someone you also probably know, Mr. Brian Burns. After a few conversations, I knew this was a special place. Then I met the rest of the executive team: Christine, Katie, Scott, Danny, Dan, Sam, and eventually our chairman, Mr. Clay Bennett. This clearly became a place I just didn't want to be, but I needed to be. I ultimately joined the team in January of 2019 as the Vice President of Corporate Partnerships, leading sales, service, and strategy for the group. I've learned so much from Brian, and he's employee number one for the team on the ground when the group moved from Seattle. Brian has an incredible connection to this community and the organization, and he truly built this from the ground up as he leads all sales and marketing operational efforts from day one. It's incredible what he continues to juggle on any given day, and I'm impressed by his leadership and his dedication to his family and his surrounding community every single day. To help you understand how this organization thinks about ethical leadership from the very top, I do want to share a brief story before we jump into the events of March 11th. And that comes from Danny Barth, our Executive Vice President and Chief Administration Officer. When I was interviewing with the team, he shared a story with me, and one he shares with every single employee that interviews. He said, when the team moved from Seattle, they had a chance to reset culture, reset vision, start from scratch. He asked Clay, our chairman, what do you want to do? Clay said, I don't know if this will work. It's a small market. I hope it'll work. I think it will, but I just don't know. It's a small market. There will be challenges. What I do know is that whatever we do will be done with one common theme: respect for all. What matters is how we treat our fans, our season ticket holders, our community partners, and our corporate partners. It will always be with the utmost respect. And I would tell you, not many owners think just like that, but he's one that truly walks the walk. It's a story and a thought process I keep with me and remind my staff and our entire team often. What I'm really here to talk about is the night of March 11th, the day the NBA stopped playing. It was a catalytic event that led to a global pause in every major sporting event and large gathering, with a heightened focus on the impacts of COVID-19. We essentially became ground zero. Now, before I jump into the details of that night, I want to rewind the clock just a little bit to bring us all back to that moment in time and to build context and to remind everyone listening what the world used to be like. A bit of nostalgia, if you will. The Thunder were something like 12-4 in their last 16 games, coming off one of the best January and February stretches of basketball in recent memory. They were only behind the Clippers and the Bucks in total wins since Thanksgiving. Rewinding even further, we made at what at time appeared to be an earth-shattering trade of marquee stars Paul George and the beloved Russell Westbrook back in July. I was actually in Las Vegas when that news was shared with me during Summer League meetings, and I almost just stayed there. Let's just say the team expectations were much different than what they ended up in. I'm absolutely thrilled for the experience we had this year. To March 11th, more than 7 months ago. Wow. We're playing the Utah Jazz. And I'll start my story that game night at Chesapeake Energy Arena around 6 p.m. As fans were streaming into the arena, we were having dinner with the State Department of Commerce's team, Ray Little and his group. Some of you may know Ray. It just so happened that Governor Kevin Stitt was going to join us. 6:30 came around and the governor showed up, and we were having dinner right at the Budweiser Brew House, a place some of you recall and know well. Our plan was to provide a live shot on Fox Sports Oklahoma of the governor and his son sitting at the arena to show how safe the arena was. I made a call to Fox, our broadcast partner. I talked to Dan and Brian. We were ready to go. Pretty amazing when you think about what happened over the next couple of minutes. But that was the state of affairs at the time. show that the arena was safe. The governor was ready to do that. We got up from dinner. It was around 6:50 p.m., 20 minutes before tip-off, to walk to his seats. He had just received a phone call as we were getting up. He hung up and he turned to me and he said, "I need to talk to your owner, Mr. Clay Bennett." I said, "Okay, but I think he's sitting courtside right now as we're about to tip off. Can I have you connect at halftime?" He said, "I need to talk to him right now." I said, "Well, I'm happy to get a hold of him, but if you give me some context, that might help." He said a Jazz player had just tested positive for COVID-19 and we needed to figure out what to do next. I said, "Well, we're probably not going to do that live shot, are we?" He said, "No." I looked up and I saw my boss, Brian Burns. I let Brian know the details and he said he had just got the call too from our official healthcare partner, OU Medicine, who had shared the news. It's about 6:52 p.m. Brian said Clay will be walking up the concourse shortly, so let's grab a conference room out of sight. We grabbed Chris Semrau, our GM of the arena, through a third-party group called ASM, who handles all operations for the building and all part-time staff. We're preparing for a huge share show the next day as well. He joined us for the meeting. We grabbed Dan Mahoney, our head of PR and social. He joined the room. We sat down in the conference room. It was about 7:05, 5 minutes before tip-off. The governor sat and notified our owner of the positive COVID test on the opposing team. We had no further information at the time. Around that same moment, our GM, Sam Presti, had notified Donnie Strack, our VP of Human and Player Performance, whom had already been notified by OU Medicine officials around the same time, to run out and stop the game. Minutes before tip-off, some of you recall this moment, the game was stopped. This is a key moment, and I want to provide emphasis here. The executive team on the business side had no indication until that moment when the governor and OU Medicine officials shared those details over the phone and in person. But the basketball operations team, led by Sam Presti, had been preparing for this moment for several weeks. Remember, there are hundreds of NBA employees in China, and at the time, they were several months ahead of the pandemic experience, if you will, and shared the severity of this illness with the league and basketball officials. This insight that was shared with Sam and our medical team weeks ahead of time allowed his team to react quickly in real time. Sam and Donnie were well prepared for a call that came in minutes before tip-off. They reacted accordingly to stop the game flow. Sam had been notified earlier that afternoon that a Jazz player wasn't feeling well and that he was awaiting test results from OU Medicine. This allowed him to best prepare for a call that eventually came, just minutes before tip-off. I can't stress the importance of this moment enough. Had the ball tipped off, likely infected players would have spent potentially 48 minutes together, sweating, bumping into each other, landing in the laps of courtside ticket holders, some of you on this call. We eventually learned other Jazz players had been in contact and tested positive, so the stoppage of play and immediate team quarantine in the locker rooms was a proactive and decisive decision that potentially saved lives. Meanwhile, we're back in the conference room. It's now 7:10. A call was made by our owner to Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, to alert him of the situation and discuss options. Clay then asked all of us to submit ideas, and I recall sharing the first idea. What's the quickest way to get all the people out of the arena? Pull the fire alarm. Our head of the arena, Chris Semrau, quickly reminded me that we should continue thinking of ideas. Brian Burns worked the phones with our head of game entertainment, John Leach, to keep the crowd entertained while we continue to discuss what needed to be done. The halftime act and the Thunder dance team could buy us 10, 15 minutes. Our head of PR and social media, Dan Mahoney, began working on crafting a message to go up on the video board if needed. In the chaos of the moment, we realized we needed to get all stakeholders together and in the same room. Basketball operations, our on-site OU medical professionals, and the executive team, we needed to get together. We contacted security and quickly made our way down to a back stairwell and down in the main corridor near the Founders Lounge and eventually outside of the team locker room. There we met with Sam and Donnie, Matt Tumbleson, our basketball head of PR. Remember, at this time, there was very little concrete information about the virus and its ability to be transmitted. Conversations ensued and the clock was ticking. Fans were getting uneasy. I remember looking at my phone, it was just constantly ringing and buzzing. I remember at a time seeing the little green dot where my text is say 150 in just over 20 minutes. We needed to get key information before deciding what to do next. 7:25, 15 minutes after tip-off. We're continuing to play halftime acts, music, anything to buy us time, but the crowd is getting uneasy. Conversations in the hallway continue. We have everyone available to get as much information as possible to make the decision on what to do about the game, the fans, and what to communicate. Do we have to cancel? Do we postpone? Can we come back out and play? Are we exposed? Am I exposed? Are our fans exposed to this virus? Do we shut the building? Do we test everyone? Should we lock the doors? How do we communicate to 18,000 people at once? What about our 14 million social media followers? Hundreds of thousands watching on TV. What's our path forward? Is there any precedent? Nope. Any other leagues with a positive test? Nope. Any other game stopped? No. 7:30. After consulting with league officials, OU Medicine, our state health officials, we determined that Gobert, the Jazz player that had tested positive, had never entered the arena and had a lack of interaction with any other players and no interaction with fans. And the knowledge that we were armed with the knowledge at the time that the virus was spread through sustained contact. The Thunder made the right decision to postpone the game and ask fans to politely leave the arena. 7:37, 27 minutes after tip-off. A message was displayed on the main video board, and the PA announcer reads the script from a cell phone text sent from Dan Mahoney and Brian Burns. Per the NBA, tonight's game has been postponed. Our ticketing and guest services team received a mass communication from Scott Loft, our VP of ticketing. It said, remain calm, handle any inquiries directly to remind fans that they will not pay for a game that didn't happen. Our goal was to quickly get the arena empty and handle crisis communications with the larger public. By 7:50, the arena was empty. We huddled back in the hallway near the locker room to begin discussing individual duties and assignments. PR and media would draft a statement of fact. Operations would ensure the building was clear. Ticketing would draft an email to season ticket holders. Sponsorship would draft an email to be sent to all accounts, and we'd convene in the main boardroom in 15 minutes. Reminder to breathe. 8:05 p.m., President Trump announces all travel to Europe had been banned. The dominoes began to fall. 8:06, the Dallas Mavericks game is canceled mid-play. 8:10, the Sacramento Kings game is postponed. Shortly after, the NBA announces that the entire season had been suspended until further notice. Back in the executive conference room, we were handling as many direct calls as we could, and we began to build strategies for the important tasks ahead. Our next crucial decision was to communicate with the public. We got to talk to our fans. What do we do to those social media followers? We need to get the word out. We announced the facts and we retweet a message from state health officials that everyone attending the game was safe. Players remained in quarantine. 9 p.m. I decided to order Papa John's pizza for the group. We craft our messages and we work through our plan. What do we do about the 150 business staff set to reopen to work tomorrow? We got on the phone with OU Medicine and we decided to open the office to handle communication in person and have on-site officials there to answer any questions. We are reminded there's no risk to anyone who worked the game day unless they had directly interacted with a player. Those are identified and asked to stay at home. Work continues through midnight. I remember leaving the arena around 1:30. You know, there really is no playbook or NBA class that can prepare you for what had happened that night. And although the events were unfortunate and the greater public health issue related to COVID-19 is continuing to weigh on all of us, I feel fortunate to have experienced and witnessed firsthand what principled, decisive leadership can accomplish during a time of unprecedented crisis. Sports has always given people a reason to connect. It's provided a common goal to celebrate and given us all something to look forward to. Our need for social distancing continues to put our world on hold in that moment in sports. began on March 11th. As I've shared, with only minutes to go until tip-off, our leadership team learned that Jazz player had tested positive. What transpired over those next 5 hours, and especially within those chaotic first 20 minutes, reminded me and candidly reinforced what ethical leadership principles are all about. After the experience, I got home about 1:30. I poured a tall glass of bourbon. I reflected on the events in a journal, and I wrote down 12 things that I want to share with you today. Number 1, communicate with firm and direct confidence in a moment of crisis, yet share your vulnerabilities. Number 2, have open communication lines with your team, both up and down the chain. Number 3, ask for help and solicit advice from experts as you build your task force to respond. Number 4, keep your emotions in check. Don't forget to breathe. Number 5, lead with empathy and understand how your message affects all levels of the organization and the larger market. Number 6, understand what your peers are doing or plan to do and respond accordingly. Number 7, be patient. Number 8, do what's right, even if it can negatively affect the near-term bottom line. Number 9, levity at the right time can be very effective. Number 10, people do want to be led. Be prepared to lean forward in the face of adversity. Number 11, be the person that people trust moments in a time of crisis. Trust in moments of a time of crisis. Number 12, challenge only presents an opportunity to improve. The obstacle is the way. The exceptional reaction of the Thunder front office, ASM, the arena operations, Thunder basketball operations, the NBA, state health and government officials, our friends at OU Medicine, and our frontline hospitality and ticketing and partnership teams on the night of March 11th helped turn what could have been a communications and healthcare nightmare into what was a manageable moment in time. I'm truly thankful to be a part of this team and happy to answer any questions you guys have at this time. I think we've got 15, 20 minutes or so.
Yes. Okay. So I want to encourage you all to go ahead and put your questions. You can use the Q&A box. We're also monitoring the chat. But yeah, we've got plenty of time here for questions. I think one of the first ones that I saw also for you, Will, someone asked if you could share the list of 12 things you learned.
Sure.
Maybe afterward we can connect on that.
Yeah.
So the first question that we got was, what kind of testing was available to you in March? When you were talking about, who needed to be tested, and what was your access looking like?
That's a great question. I really don't know. Sam and Donnie, they worked so closely with OU Medicine. They used whatever was available at the time, and no one was getting tested regularly. There wasn't a protocol in place at the time. I think that the Jazz player was simply tested because he had symptoms that they thought might have been the flu. And when he tested negative for the flu, that alerted them to try other tests. And that was simply a call through OU Medicine. That wasn't something that we had done. And then we went through whatever publicly available testing was at the moment once the players were quarantined and we get access to those things. And but I would say that's what's evolved the most. I think that's what made this bubble work in Orlando was rapid testing. And I think the public at large knows that the availability of rapid testing now, but that's what helped get from not playing games, total shutdown, to playing games in a bubble, and thankfully and successfully completed the 2019-20 season with a champion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I had another question. You very quickly said that within those first few minutes, the instruction to the ticket office was assure fans that they will not pay for a game that didn't happen. Like you said, and then you said later, do the right thing even when it may affect the bottom line negatively in the short term. I guess that seems like a huge decision when you've got 13,000 people in the arena. So, but they came to that quickly. What do you think? What would you attribute that to?
Yeah, I think it was the right decision. I mean, telling people in the moment there was chaos, right? There was a lot of questions. And so our goal was, again, to get people out of the arena safely, calmly. And the best way to do that was, if someone's talking to the ticket office, say, hey, I paid $300 for this ticket, or I've got 4 family members out here. This cost me $1,200, right? You're not going to pay for a game that didn't happen, right? I think that helped calm the nerves in that moment. And our service team and our frontline executives handle that in person. And I think that's a strategy that really sets us apart from other markets. I don't know, teams might have held that credit or said the game, technically the lights turned on and you owe us that money. And that's principled leadership, I think. And I think the decision was candidly not a difficult one. I think it's the right thing to do.
Great, thanks. Someone asks, was the decision to cancel unanimous, and was that immediate, or was there a debate? And if there was a debate, what was that like?
I would say there was debate. I think you have to remember that on the basketball ops side, they had good insight into what was happening in China, which I had mentioned. And so the ownership teams across the NBA and the operations group had role played a scenario like this. And no decision is largely made in a vacuum. And so I think they had conversations prior to this event, say, what do we do? Do we pause the season if this happens? And Adam had largely gotten, a commissioner got buy-in for that. So we knew that if we were going to make this decision, that the NBA was ready to back us. And he was there. And so I think Sam and his team was so well prepared for that moment that there was some debate on what to do, because it was the first time it had happened. Now it's a no-brainer, right? We see the NFL canceling games or postponing games. We see Major League Baseball had to move 25 games, right? Well, yeah, there's precedent. In the moment, you're like, well, can we isolate the player and get everybody out? And again, it goes back to the ethical decision that what's right here? Where is the path of least resistance, but mostly what's health and wellness is forefront. Like, what can we do for our fans to make sure they're safe and healthy, and not playing a game that night? What's the best answer?
Yeah. We just had this because I think it ties in well with what you're just saying. And ultimately, who made the call? Was it Adam Silver or was it the Thunder here locally?
It's a joint decision. A joint decision. I mean, the commissioner's office has to approve of a formal postponement or a cancellation, right? But he's not going to do that without owner or basketball ops influence. This is, and so Adam's been really good about that for various decisions throughout the years. He's not going to stop a game, pause a game, do anything without buy-in from all players. So it was a joint in real time communication.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of players, that was another question. How did the players react to the news, and what advice was given to them in that evening?
Yeah, I think there's probably a famous video going around of Chris kind of running out and what's going on? What is this about? And Chris is fantastic. He is a unbelievable leader, and we've all kind of followed him over this year. He's the head of the NBA PA, the Players Association. So, him and Adam work daily on all matters. So, Chris really gathered the troops together, helped influence any statement moving forward, kept the team calm. They were hanging out in the locker room for several hours before we knew what to do moving forward with the team. The Jazz were there well into the night to make sure we could get them out of there and back to Utah safely if we needed to quarantine. So I think the players were focused on basketball and winning the game, and were largely just in shock like everybody else. But the locker room was lighthearted to my knowledge, and that they stayed there, ate food, and did what they needed to do. No panic. But I attribute that to Chris's leadership, our basketball ops team leadership, our coach, to keep those guys calm during that time. But there was no problems whatsoever with the players. But certainly they were just ready to win a game.
Yeah, absolutely. They were warmed up and ready to go.
Yeah.
I guess most of our questions are switching to be about you personally. And I guess we did also have the question, what does attendance look like in the future? And do you have any idea of when the new season will resume?
Yeah. I think the latest that's been shared is largely what's being discussed. As early as yesterday, there was a report came out about January 18th as a target date to come back. That's 3+ months from now. The league's doing everything it can to restart in early January. The goal is full attendance with a full slate of games, 82 games, right? Plus playoffs. So we're doing everything we can as a team, as an arena, as a league to get everything ready for that moment, to make sure we have the PPE, the proper distancing, contactless ticketing, contactless payments, everything you see at all these other arenas. And we're leading the charge in that space. Our GM of the arena shared with me yesterday that our arena is being looked at as a best practice for their cleanliness, their processes, their way of thinking. So all the rest of the arenas can follow suit. So who knows what will happen over the next 3 months, but the latest we're hearing is a mid to late January restart with full fans. Whether that's realistic or not, we don't know, but that is the goal that we're working for.
Great. Someone asks, in your number one, you mentioned vulnerability. Can you explain why that's important in making ethical decisions?
Oh, I think none of us have all the information on any topic. And if you do, you probably keep reading. I think it's in a moment of crisis. No one knew what to do. There was no precedent, and so you had to just lean on doing what's right. And so you go back to your basic principles. But I think the vulnerability that the leadership team showed in those moments, and what basketball ops showed in the moments, to say, wait, tell me all the information. I am not an expert. Okay, let's call the experts. If that phone call isn't made and those conversations isn't had with OU Medicine, with state health officials, with the governor's office, with the league, if someone in that room would have just stood up and said, this is what we're going to do, right? Failure. And so I think the vulnerability of the group and of Sam and his team to just stand back and say, you know what? I don't know the answers, right? But let's talk to the experts. That's vulnerable, right? These are very, very highly educated, seasoned executives that needed to stand back and say, I don't know the answer right now, but we have to make a decision. Before we do that, let's make sure that we engage all of the experts. That's vulnerability.
Yeah.
It's something that I catch myself all the time with my team, encourage them to submit vulnerability with their staffs. That I think that's something that is imperative to have as a leader, because if you just think you know all the answers, you don't. And you need to be open to feedback and other inputs in order to make the right call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on that same note, how does an organization balance being timely, transparent, and showing empathy while also still being thoughtful and thorough in their communications with their internal and external parties?
Say that one more time. Sorry,
So how does an organization balance being timely and transparent and show empathy to the situation and to, all of the parties involved, while also being thorough in their communications?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, an important topic. I mean, we wanted facts. I think there were teams, we were looking at our peers around the country in real time. The Utah Jazz tweeted out a statement of fact shortly after the events had occurred. Dallas Mavericks had gotten on a press conference and started to talk about it. I think, we wanted to take a little step back, get all the information, align with state health officials, because the immediate question was going to be, am I exposed as a fan, right? We were asking that ourselves, we're there, what's our exposure? But we were reaffirmed that unless you were interacting with the Jazz player who never went to the arena, was never there, that you would need to be quarantined. And so we felt confident enough at that time, and that took time. That was a couple of hours of conversation to get there. So then we could communicate that, right? So yes, you needed to get timely, but I think that goes to one of the principles, which is patience. I mean, as you can imagine, in that room, everybody's phone was ringing, right? Texts were flying around, and what's the exposure? What's going on? I need information. And I think in that moment in time, it can be easy to just say, this person needs this answer, we should give that to them. It's what's the answer that's going to be accurate, step one. Step two, how do we communicate that accuracy and fact to make the greater public aware, not just one person? And so I think that was tough to do in the moment in time, because you want to respond to these things, and we're kind of trained to do that. I maybe it's the social media world or quick email, I don't know, but that was one of the harder things, to just wait and get it out there in the right time.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And we had another quick question about communications, but navigating the appropriate level of transparency to inform people, but not to alarm them. So I'm sure you all probably had to think through that as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, again, you have to rewind the clock. I mean, the people were going to games, eating hamburgers, drinking beers, right? Like, that was March 10th, March 11th, March 12th. It was, I don't know if that's a good idea. So you had to lean into that, but also take the health and wellness approach that, look, you need to do what's right for the fan, and just put it on pause. And we're the first league to do that. I mean, everything else shut down after that. March Madness was done, Masters was moved, all the NBA was shut. It was a catalytic change. Premier League soccer, right? It was a global impact from that moment.
Absolutely. Okay, so moving to a couple of questions, talking about you as someone who has been in several countries and parts of the U.S., what attributes of Oklahoma and Oklahoma City as a community have you appreciated?
That's a good one. Look, it's several things. I don't miss the traffic in Chicago. Let's say that. Okay, like getting from point A to point B takes way too long. This is fantastic community to get around. I appreciate that. But first and foremost, for me, it's family principles, right? It's that you do what's right for you and your neighbor. People care about each other. I think that's genuine. Sometimes people are too nice, right? Like I remember getting an Uber driver when I first moved from Chicago, and he would always ask all these questions and how's your day? And sometimes, you just want to be quiet for a little bit, And but I love that. Like that's great. I get an Uber in Beijing, or they don't have Uber there. It's a different product, but I get an Uber in Chicago, and he's not going to talk to me, right? So people care that they lead with empathy. Like, they actually genuinely want to know. Like, if someone says, "How are you doing?" in another market, it's just a phrase. If someone says, "How are you doing?" in Oklahoma, they actually want to know. And if you're not doing well, they actually want to help. Like, to me, that is a special thing that only this market can claim. And I haven't experienced that anywhere else. And so to me, it's always been about the people that you share your time with, the people that you invest with, the people that you share a meal with, your family. Like, this market cares about those things. And I think that center, which is love, right? That's the kind of basic feeling that drives that. That is a sustainable emotion that hopefully will continue to drive the state forward, that will continue to drive the commerce for the state through a challenging moment, that love for each other, that in our neighbors, will ultimately transcend. And I don't think, and you're seeing that a lot now. I think you're seeing a very challenging time across our country and in other markets that maybe don't feel that way. And I think that's helped us stay above the fray.
Yeah, absolutely. Who would you say most influenced you to develop your character?
Oh, I think it's a series of people, but my dad and my mom. I mean, they great family, great parents that always told me to do what's right. My dad's a business owner. He owns his own company for the last 25 years. And in his office, I remember walking as a kid, and it was just a sign that says, "Do what's right." Like, I have pictures of arenas. Maybe I should have that. Right? But it's been ingrained in me as a kid that whatever you do the right thing, right? Whatever it is. Yeah. So It starts there at the home. It starts with family, but I think I've had great mentors that I mentioned earlier that have helped me, and you pick from each one. I would say my parents first and foremost.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we've got time for one more question, and I thought this one might be a good one to sum it up. When did it really hit you that the NBA changed the world that day?
In the moment, no. I remember I have pictures on my phone. I knew that this was, of the group meeting there. And I remember there's a photo of the group, and, Donald Trump has a message right there that the air traffic has been suspended to Europe, and we're there at the arena, and behind me is the message. Like, I remember feeling that this is unique, and to try to take as much in, breathe, document it. I take little notes on my phone in between moments. But then I think the next day, when dominoes started to fall with other travel restrictions and leagues shutting down, like, it became real. Then that was something. But the pace was so fast, things kept moving. But I think you just, would try to slow it down if you could. But certainly that next day, when everything else closed, it was there. And then moments like this, simply talking about it, you're like, holy crap. How much the world has changed, our work life has changed, going out to restaurants has changed, but it was an incredible moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that moment and all of those that came after. I know that this has been really really eye-opening and gave us a lot of insight into the Thunder organization. I know I've seen several comments from people here that say that they were big Thunder fans before, but now are even more so, knowing the way that our leadership has handled this, and really just operates with integrity as often as they have the opportunities. So thanks for sharing with us today, Will. Thank you, Joshua, again for sharing with us earlier. To everyone here, I see lots and lots of comments coming through, so thank you for that. We will download our comments afterward. For those of you who are requesting CPEs, please be sure to just put a thanks or another little CPE in the as you're leaving, so that we know that you were here for the entire program. I will stay on for a couple more minutes. Like I said, if you have not yet renewed your membership, please go through. We'll offer just right before the program to give 4 tickets to an upcoming game. So for all of you who are going to renew by the end of the month, and those of you who have already renewed, don't worry, you'll be included in this as well. But he has generously offered for us to draw the name of one of our members to receive 4 tickets to an upcoming game. So please be sure to get those memberships in. Thanks, Will, for offering that. I think that'll be fun, and especially once we see what the new season looks like, we'll have somebody there to experience it. So I think that is it for me. Our next program is going to be on November 18th. Dr. Katricia Pearson, the president of East Central University, is going to share with us about the role of leaders in promoting ethics. And then we will have a break in December, as we normally do, and we'll reconvene in January 13th, with Dr. Talia Carroll, the new Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion at Oklahoma City University. So we've got lots of great things planned, and thank you all so much. I wish, like Will said earlier, I wish I could see all of you to be able to thank you for coming, but we just appreciate you all being here and for your continued commitment to learn more about how we can all behave ethically and make these ethical decisions within our own companies and communities. So Will, thanks again for sharing this really, really excellent illustration of what that looks like. So like
Thank
I
you.
said,
Appreciate the time.
Yeah, we'll stay on for a minute, but thanks again, everybody, for being with us.